Okay, so we saw how we can enter MIDI notes using a virtual MIDI keyboard. We saw how we can enter MIDI notes using an external MIDI keyboard, but we can also work, and I did mention this, without a keyboard at all. We can just enter notes directly in the piano roll. Now I'm going to work on that a bit in this video, and I'm also going to show you a couple of other things that I want to talk about in the process. So the first thing I will do is I have a new project over here. The only thing I've done other than the default is I changed the BPMs to 80, and I changed the grid to eighth note triplets. So if you right click over here, and if my grid decides to behave, I chose, instead of the eighth note, so 1/8, I have 1/8 with a T after. And what that does is it gives me basically a triple subdivision of each beat, effectively acting like 12/8, which it's a better way to do it than to actually use 12/8, which you can do. You can type any time signature you want in here, but because the metronome is kind of quarter note based, you have to go jump through hoops to get it to work properly. This is actually much more efficient, and you get the exact same result. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to track, insert virtual instrument on new track, and I'm going to choose the contact player. I'm going to go to add. I'm going to say no to this routing. And in the options here, I will choose the factory selection library. And in this factory selection library, I will take the pop kit and drag it into my window over here. And now here you have kind of a mapping of all the things that are available here. There's different individual sounds. And then there's also various patterns. These purple keys here, if you hold them down, you get a whole pattern and you see what instruments are actually playing. Now, you might notice that if you click on a note, you actually see the instrument name, which is kind of convenient. It would be nicer if you could actually see it here instead of, but at least you get to see what it is. So you could use this to then map the MIDI keys, which I'll show you in a minute. Okay, so let's say I have my pop kit now. I'm going to change the name to pop kit, and now I will let's get into entering some notes. So how do you go about entering notes? Well, again, before what we've done before is just hit record and we start playing, and when that happens is Reaper automatically creates what's called a MIDI item and throws these notes, the notes that we've recorded in there. Then we can double click, open it, and edit it. But if we're starting without a keyboard, we actually have to create a MIDI item first. So we could do this one of two ways. We can select a chunk, let's say a measure, and we go to insert, new MIDI item. Or we can also just hit, on a Mac it would be command, and it draws a pencil. So if you're on a PC, press Control, see if that shows a pencil. You should look like a pencil like this, and just hold it down while you drag. And now you can basically draw a MIDI item. And either method will give you the exact same result. And now we can double click on this and we open our MIDI roll. Okay, now this is what you should see. You should see keys on the left. And now your grid, I have it so that it shows this triplet. Your grid may show as straight eighth notes. So you might see kind of a discrepancy between the grid in the MIDI item versus the grid on the outside. Those two are independent, okay? So you might have a 16th note grid in here while you have a triplet grid outside. It's just different. You can change either one of them independently. So what in this case, since we are trying to work with a triplet feel, we can go here where it says grid and we choose eighth note, and then instead of straight, we do triplet. And now what that will do is it will show us a grid. That's the exact same thing that we saw outside. So it would be beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, beat 4, and each of those has then a triple division. So that's all well and good. Now, if we start hitting notes here, we hear the notes from the drum kit, but we don't have a way to know what they are until we've actually hit them. So that's not all very, very useful. Now, what you can do is you can rename individual notes. So let's just say if I open my contact, and I set it off to the side over here, if I hit a note, let's say, what is C4? C4 is no, actually, that's a pattern. Let's do C3. So C3 is mid-tom to left. Let's choose one that has an easier name. Let's say ride bell, okay? Let's do cowbell. So cowbell is a G sharp 3. And so what I can do now is I can right click over here in this kind of gray area and go to File, Note, CC Names, and I can say rename current note, and I can just type cowbell. And so now I have a name that appears here. So every time I hit the cowbell, I can, it'll be easier to spot it. And you can do this for 2 or 3 instruments that you know you're going to use, and that kind of saves you a little bit of time of having to kind of guess where the notes are. That's all well and good, but what if you wanted to see what they all are at the same time? You can do that too. And the way you do it is you search for a MIDI map, drum map, and it just so happens that on a website called ReaperStash, users, people like you and I, create these maps and they just upload them as text files in this thing called ReaperStash, and so that other people don't have to do it. It's kind of a nice thing people do, like user community. And so if you're using a drum kit and you would like to see if there's a drum map already available, you can go to ReaperStash and kind of search. There's a search option there, and you can see what's available. And it just so happens that this particular pop kit by Native Instruments, since it's a free kit and it's pretty common, there is a drum map file, text file available in ReaperStash. So I went ahead and downloaded it and I uploaded it on your module so you can use it. And what you can do is actually, instead of, so what we did before is we went to File, we went to Note, CC Names, and we said rename current note. But if you go a little lower, you see that there's an option to choose a file. And what that refers to is this text file that I'm talking about called Contact Player, in this case 4.1 Free PopKit Drum Map. The name is irrelevant. What matters is that it's a text file, and inside of the text file basically there's a list of names for all these instruments with corresponding MIDI values. So you can just double click on or open this. I already have it, so I'm going to go back here, File, CC Names, load, and if you've loaded it already, it'll become available here. So if you have multiple drum kits, you can the drum kit maps, they'll show up here. And so now you see that what I've done is that I've uploaded it, I've opened it, and now all the names just populate the key. Now it looks a little messy, and you can sort of see that it's not so ideal to have it as a key, kind of a keyboard layout, piano keyboard layout. But if you look up here where there's piano roll, next to it there's another option, which is to view things as just notes. And so now if I switch to view, everything is exactly the same. So it's still technically a C, whatever, this is still middle C, but of course because we're dealing with drums and we don't care that this is a C, we just want to know what all these things are. Now these don't have a name because they're patterns, okay? So you could, let's see, do these actually have a name? No, they don't. They don't have a name, that's why. So, but you can come up with a name if you want to call it something, you can. You can always go here and then do what we've done before, which is you change the name of that single note if you want to call it pattern, cool pattern, whatever, okay? But this will save us a little bit of time because we now have a map, okay? Right, so that's all well and good. I'm going to turn this off so it doesn't distract us, and I'm going to move this over here, and I'm also going to zoom in a little bit. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's add some notes. Okay, so you can, without using a keyboard, you can just double click on any note you want, and you can just kind of draw a pattern here, let's say, and you can just kind of experiment. Okay, and then you can go back and play it back and see how bad it is. Okay, you can do it that way. Now it's kind of nice to have the toggle repeat on, because then you can hear it as you write it, basically. So for example, and let's say you go, I kind of like this note. You want to add now. And you could do things like that, and then while you're doing it, you can pause. You can then so you can enter these. Now, when you double click on a note, the value, the length of the note will be based on the grid. Now, for drums, it doesn't always make sense, and actually generally really doesn't make sense to worry about note durations. But of course, in other situations, it does. And I have a thought to share about that. But first, you can then, for each of these MIDI notes, you can hover over it, and if you go right to the top of it, you see something that has an arrow up and down. You can use that to change the velocity. So if I drag down, you see that it goes from 120, which is the loudest it can be, all the way to whatever you want it to be. It could be so quiet you can hardly hear it. So in this case, I have 54, and you can compare the two. You can also select everything and change all of the velocities at the same time. You can also change all the lengths at the same time. So let's say I want them all to be longer. I can drag them all together. That's not what I meant to do. I can actually make them all longer if I wanted to, except now it will refuse to move because I am talking. But you can, hold on a second. There. Yeah, you can change the length. I think it's probably because this one was getting in the way. But let's just we take these two notes and we select them. And now I can change the length of both at the same time. Okay. Okay. So, but once again, especially for some for percussion, often you don't really want to worry about duration. So you can change the view modality to something that's a little bit more percussion oriented. So up here, there's one called rectangular notes, which is the normal mode, and this is the one that shows you durations. This is definitely what you want to use when you're writing for instruments that are not percussion or not or pitched instruments, let's say. Although that's not an absolute rule, because some percussion instruments you might want to specify a duration. But another way to do it is to switch to kind of triangle view, triangle mode, or whatever they're called, or these diamonds. And so now you have it like this, and you just see where they're happening. Okay. So it's just another way to do it. It sounds exactly the same. Nothing really changes. It's just that the note durations don't get in the way. And I guess especially if you have kind of repeated notes, maybe you prefer that. It doesn't really make a difference for me. I kind of like the standard one. But anyway, so you can then go here. Again, you double click and you add anything you want. But I was talking about the grid. And so now if I want it to be a quarter note long, you see that now what happens when I'm sorry, I meant to say straight. If I now go to, no, that's not what I meant to do. Yes, the grid is not a bar long. I'm sorry, I meant to do quarter notes. Yeah, I didn't mean to put one. One would be the whole measure. And then now when I double click, instead of it being a kind of an eighth note triplet, which is what it was before, the default is automatically becomes a quarter note quarter note. So the point is, if you double click, it kind of creates a note wherever you are, or an event, let's call it, let's say, based on the size of the grid. Okay. So you have to be mindful of that, although you can always change it. Again, you can drag and move it like that. And of course, the way it snaps is based on the grid as well as the fact that you can have snap to grid on, which if I turn it off, now I can change this length to anything I want. Although in the case of percussion, of drums, it doesn't particularly make sense. But so anyway, you can again change notes up and down. You can turn the grid back on. You can change the duration. You can change the velocity over here and do all of those things like that. Okay, then we talked about drum mapping. Very good. Let's now, so we have a pattern that, let's say we're happy with this pattern. Okay, so you can experiment like this. And of course, you can do longer patterns. You can have this pattern then repeat. And now you just change a little bit of, something. Let's say you want it to be, let's say Let me go back to my eighth note triplet. Let's see. Okay. Anyway, so you can make small little adjustments to this particular pattern. Let's say that's mine. Okay, so now I have a 2-bar, which then I can take here and loop over here, and I can, let's go from the beginning of it. Let me do it this way. And then it repeats over and over. So if you want it to be a 2-bar pattern and you decided that you wanted to then kind of edit it all at one time, you can also right click and glue it. And now this gets fused into a single Midi item. Okay, so now I have, when I open the Midi item, I'm seeing it all at the same time. And so now I can go back and again, add some things, change some things. Where's my cowbell? I want to add a cowbell. No, that's not it. That's the right bell. Cow. Let's say I want to add a cowbell here. Let's make it a little bit louder. I'm going to select them, raise it. So now I have a cowbell on beat measure 2, beat 1. Okay, actually the little glitch that I created gave me an idea. When you, let's say that you want some of this pattern, some of the rhythms within this pattern not to be triplet based, you can just change the grid to something else. So now let's say I have a straight, these are straight 16th notes, and say that I want it to go now, I want it to be, just for this moment, to be an even rhythm. Well, that wasn't. There we go. Let's say something like that. So now we have kind of a 2 against 3 sort of feel. Listen again. All right, let me make this a little bit louder. Actually, let me make everything a little less loud. And then we make these 3 a little louder. Okay, so let's listen again. So pay attention to this part right here. Okay, and of course, there's no limit to this. You can make it, I mean, let's see. Let's say that I want it to be, let's say I want it to be 5 notes, down 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, something like that. Then I would go here and I would say that I want it to be 1/20, which means that I'm dividing the whole note into 20 parts, which is to say that it's 5 quintuplets. And so now I have a grid that's quintuplets. So you can create all kinds of intricate rhythmic things very easily by kind of messing or changing the grid and adding things, you know, to do something a little bit more kind of odd meter. Yeah, it's a little rigid for my taste, but anyway, so you get the idea. So let's go back to the triplet pattern that actually was kind of nice. Okay, so this is our background over here. Okay, so the other thing I want to show you is what's called key snap. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this track and I'm going to change this one. I'm going to call this, well, I don't know what I'm going to call it yet. I haven't decided what instrument it's going to be. So let's get rid of this and let's open our effects. And we're going to stay within Contact. And instead of going to factory selection, we'll go to player series. and choose one of these keys. Let's close this out and let's see, maybe Analog Dreams. What does that sound like? No, not that one. Let's close that out. Maybe Hybrid Keys. Okay. Let's see. Electric. I want it to be maybe this. Okay, that's fine with me. So I have Hybrid Keys, and under here I chose the Ambient EP preset. So good. So now let's call this keys. Okay, let's give it a generic name. And we can also go and change the color, do something like that, however we want to do this. If we want to change, keep it nice and differentiated, we can do that too. Okay, so now we'll do the same thing. We'll create a 2-bar Midi item. So since I'm already here, I should be able to just say insert, and it'll now create a brand new Midi item over here. And okay. Yes. So we will now double click in here and we'll do, let's actually go ahead and, yeah, so maybe duplicating it was not the absolute best of ideas, but we can get rid of this. Clear note names. Okay, so I'm having to create extra steps just because I had a drum mat loaded over there, but I cleared it. So now we're good to go. So there's our keys. So there's a cool feature here, which only shows up, by the way, when you're working, of course, with pitched instruments, which when you switch to the piano roll mode, Reaper assumes that you're working, with things like, guitars or keyboards or whatever. But when you switch to something like note names, it assumes you're working with something else like drums, so it actually removes that option. But again, when I go back to the piano roll, you'll see that over here, there's a little button called Key Snap. So if I click on Key Snap, I'm now able to actually have the notes that I enter snap to a key. Now, you don't need this, but it's kind of an interesting thing, particularly if you're kind of randomizing, working a little bit at random at first. Let's say you're kind of throwing down ideas. It's kind of a nice little option. So you could do something like A, and then you can choose the type of scale that you want. So I could do natural minor, I can do pentatonic, let's say, as a major pentatonic or as a minor pentatonic. You can even do triads. You can have chords, not just triads, different kinds of chords. Let's see what this sounds like. And what it does, it basically eliminates all the notes that are not in the scale. So basically, okay, so it's minor. It's kind of weird how it lays out the keyboard. But anyway, but basically, effectively what this does is it makes it impossible for you to write something that's outside of the key of the scale, which is kind of it's sort of a big, I suppose, a beginner-friendly thing, but why not? Let's mess around with that. So we'll do the same thing that we did before, and we're going to do Command Option, and we're going, actually no, we didn't do it before, never mind. So here's an interesting way that you could do this. You can, let's change the grid to eighth notes, okay? And straight eighth notes, okay, so that's all we see. Now we can do kind of a steady stream of notes, and we could kind of paint it. You could do it one of two ways. You can either do Command Option and basically just draw, there we go, Command, and you can just draw a straight line if you can manage to draw a straight line. And what it'll do is it'll basically, based on the grid, draw a series of notes. Now this is just going to be a bunch of repeated notes, okay? But then what I can do is I can move some of these notes around. Let me actually select them all and reduce the velocity a little bit. And so now what I can do, I have all these notes that I can then move around like this, and just kind of, just throw them out and see what happens. You notice how it skips certain notes? because they're not in the key. So let's say this is what we get now. Okay, so okay, and of course you can go here and remove some notes. Let's see. Let's say you want to cut out some of the notes. And you can make some of these note values a little bit longer. You can drag the notes out. Okay, and then you can change the grid to 16th notes, and let's say you want to have a repeated note here. You can do it that way. Not crazy about that, but yeah, I'm not super crazy about this. Let's just start it over. Okay, so let's do it now using a triplet feel, just like we did with our drums, and let's see if that produces better results. Oh, by the way, the second way that you can do this, so I can do Command Option and draw a straight line like that, or I can do Command. Let's see, it's another one of those options. There's another one that allows you, oh, there it is. It's Option Shift to just kind of paint like this, up and down, so freely. Okay, it's a little crazy. But then of course you can select everything and press Q to quantize, so you can have something a little bit wilder, if you will. Let me start it from the beginning. Let's see, this is probably a bit much, but let's see. Anyway, so it's kind of fun because as you kind of randomly throw things here, you can sometimes end up with things that are pretty interesting. And so it's a good way to kind of have a little fun, and in the process maybe discover some things that you might actually quite like. You know, let's say. I don't know. Well, I just have an idea. Actually, let's do it like this. Let me take all of this and just copy and then paste. So this is the same thing over twice, okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this whole thing and duplicate it. And then now on the second time, I need to have this key snap on. So you can add a little melody or something. Okay, so this is from the beginning. Oh, sorry, I need to turn the looping off. Okay, anyway, you get, I think you get the point. And then of course you can change these notes. Not what I meant to do. Key snaps keeps turning off. Yeah, so something like that. And then I can repeat the same one over here. Anyway, so you kind of get the idea of how easy this can be. And you can even take all of this and move it over by one, and then take this and copy and paste it over here. I could do this, I could be doing this using regions, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, so we start just with the drums. The rhythm of this, so I'm going to change that. I like this a little bit better. Anyway, so that's key snap, and of course you can turn it off. I mean, you could do it for a little while, and then you decide that you don't want to snap to the key anymore. You just turn it off, and that's the end of that. And then you can create a new pattern, and that time snap the new pattern to a new key. So you can have maybe multiple keys going on at the same time, or keys that change, scales that change, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so those are all some features that are available, and yes, I hope you have some fun with it.